We are going to start talking about World War II. It's impossible to fully grasp the motivations and events of this conflict without discussing World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, which concluded World War I, laid the groundwork for many factors that would eventually erupt into World War II. Some historians even suggest that the period between the wars was merely an extended intermission within a single protracted conflict. While there are connections, I believe it's important to understand that World War II was not a monolithic event. It was comprised of three distinct, albeit interconnected, wars: the conflict between the Western Allies and Japan, the war between the Western Allies and Germany, and the brutal war between the Soviet Union and Germany. Let's examine the factors that led to this shift in global affairs. Recall America's traditionally isolationist foreign policy. The United States historically avoided global conflicts unless vital trade interests were directly threatened. The Great War marked a major departure from this approach. However, after the war, widespread disillusionment set in. Many across the nations involved felt the entire conflict had been a tragic mistake. This sentiment triggered a period of pessimism, and Americans were particularly eager to withdraw from the world stage and return to isolationism. Politically, this shift is evident in Roosevelt's victory over Hoover. Additionally, while Democrats initially controlled both Congress and the presidency from 1932 to 1938, a Republican-led Congress took hold soon after. This new Congress strongly opposed another foreign war and enacted laws solidifying the United States' commitment to neutrality. Notably, this position resonated with the majority of the American public. President Roosevelt, however, diverged from the prevailing desire for neutrality. He recognized two distinct threats: American interests were under pressure in the Pacific, and the very concept of democracy was endangered in Europe. Roosevelt, deeply influenced by Wilsonian diplomacy, firmly believed in America's responsibility to promote and defend democracy worldwide. Consequently, American economic interests faced challenges in the Pacific, while an ideological threat loomed in Europe. Roosevelt foresaw the inevitability of the United States entering a future war. Even as Congress enacted neutrality laws, he subtly began preparing for this eventuality. Your readings will illustrate the steps America took toward abandoning isolationism, even before the attack on Pearl Harbor. The connection between Japan and Germany was the Tripartite Pact. This treaty, uniting Germany, Japan, and Italy, primarily targeted the Soviet Union, a perceived threat to both Germany and Japan. Italy joined as Germany's ally. The pact's significance lay in its guarantee. Should the United States engage in war with Japan, Germany would immediately declare war on the United States. This was common knowledge, a crucial factor in understanding the unfolding events. Let's shift our focus to the mounting tension in the Pacific. Japan, having undergone rapid industrialization in the late 19th century, emerged as a powerful industrial nation. Like European colonial powers, Japan lacked direct access to vital resources. To sustain its industries, Japan, like its European counterparts, adopted an imperialist approach, seeking control of resource-rich areas in Asia. Inevitably, its expanding ambitions positioned Japan as the primary rival to the dominant Pacific power, the United States, which possessed significant interests in Asia, particularly the Philippines, a U.S. territory. Japan's resource dependency, unlike the self-sufficiency of the resource-rich United States, drove its imperial aggression. Economic hardship during the Great Depression led to a military takeover of the Japanese government. The new regime resolved to secure resources by force, invading Manchuria and China, while outlining a grand plan to conquer vast swaths of Asia to fuel their industrial might. President Roosevelt recognized the escalating Japanese threat to American interests in the Philippines. Throughout the 1930s, tensions soared between the United States and Japan. The situation reached a tipping point when the United States imposed an embargo on Japan, halting the sale of critical goods, particularly wood and steel. This severely impacted the Japanese economy, leaving them desperate for alternative sources. Against this backdrop, Japan developed a bold strategy, a sweeping offensive throughout the Pacific to seize resource-rich territories. They intended to present this conquest to the world as a fait accompli, a done deal. Japanese leadership reasoned, correctly at the time, that the Western powers appeared weakened by the Depression and reluctant to uphold punitive measures outlined in the Treaty of Versailles. They calculated that a swift and decisive takeover in the Pacific would go unchallenged. The Japanese leadership, while planning their ambitious offensive, recognized the potential threat posed by the United States fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor. They devised a plan, a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, intended to cripple the American Pacific Fleet and thereby deter a U.S. response to their expansion. Their offensive was remarkably successful. Japan rapidly seized territories outlined in green on this map. Simultaneously, they executed the Pearl Harbor attack, severely damaging the U.S. fleet. However, this calculated gamble spectacularly backfired. Instead of discouraging American involvement, the attack ignited a wave of fury across the United States. American public opinion, formerly staunchly isolationist, swung decisively in favor of war against Japan. Furthermore, the Tripartite Pact ensured Germany's declaration of war against the United States. As a result of these actions, the United States found itself thrust into two simultaneous wars, one in Europe and one in the Pacific. Let's consider the specific consequences of the Pearl Harbor attack on the American fleet. The Japanese strike targeted the majority of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, inflicting severe damage. Their intent was not merely to impact morale. They sought to cripple the American naval capability in the region. However, the United States possessed a powerful advantage, a highly efficient industrial base capable of rapid wartime production. Despite significant losses, the U.S. could build ships at a pace exceeding the Japanese capacity to destroy them. At one point, the U.S. launched a new destroyer each day. This industrial capacity, which Japan lacked, allowed the U.S. to overcome the initial setback. As the American war machine relentlessly expanded, the Japanese ability to replace lost ships diminished, steadily weakening their position in the conflict. Please proceed to answer the questions in the assignment on Canvas. If you have any questions, you can post them in the open forum discussion or contact the professor using Canvas email.